Welcome back to The Conservative. Hi there, I'm Mike Lannon, your host, and thanks to PEGTV for helping me produce this show for you. And it's going to be a quick half hour, and we'll go as fast as we can and try to cover some ground here. Want to start off right away by just talking about some timelines. For those of you that are watching the show that have children in school, or grandparents here that have got children in school, believe it or not, as I'm taping this show today, there's only 67 school days left out of the 177. So when children think, oh my God, it's school's forever, it's not. It's very, very fast. As you all that are watching the show have been to school know, 177 days of schooling is not a lot of time. So that's come and gone. And now you've got the 40 days of Lent as I start this show. You got 40 days of Lent for the Christian believing community. And that would mean that 40 days from now will be Easter. Actually, it's about 38 days now, a little less than that. Yeah, Ash Wednesday, yeah. So it's closer to 35 days now before Easter. But Lent should remind everybody of their destiny to heaven, for those of you that believe in Christianity and believe that there's an afterlife and that through Jesus Christ, that's how you get there. That's one particular avenue of faith that people worldwide, the largest faith worldwide, believe. That there is an afterlife, and the only way to get there is through Jesus. So you've got other thoughts out there, and you can go explore all of that. I just happen to believe in that particular religious belief, and believe in the afterlife. And I think that everything we've been able to read for the last 8,000 years, and that's about as far as we can read back, for 8,000 years, there's been a biblical record of the first 5 books of the Bible for sure, and it's probably an oral tradition that finally came down and was written down. So that being accurate to that point, certainly is the point being made that there's an afterlife, and that's something that people in most cultures worldwide believe in. Okay, it's the same as you've heard me talk many, many times, is that there have been cataclysmic events, and the most recent cataclysmic event that we know of is, of course, the Ice Age. And right there during that Ice Age, there appears to have been a major flood worldwide, and all the great cultures talk about it. We don't know if that's from a great impact. We have a lot of people that don't even know that we have a great flood. I was reading today where they have found a tremendous amount of ancient stone out in the Atlantic Ocean, and I'm not quite sure, but where it starts and where it ends. But I didn't prepare that for the show. It just came to my mind as we were talking about 8,000 years ago or further. Most of you have heard of Atlantis. That's certainly part of the mythological legend that's out there. And of course, Homer talked about it. Plato talked about it, and he had gotten that from ancient records himself. And these posts that they have found out in the Atlantic Ocean appear to have been, and the debris field that they've got and they've found is a long chain of posts out there made of stone that, if they stretch as far as they think they are stretching, pretty much covered the Atlantic Ocean. So it would have been stone point to stone point to stone point, crossing over in a boat. So you could actually dock the boat along the way. So that would be a very interesting precept if it's true, and it would certainly change the modern thinking of history, certainly. But we don't know a lot about history past even 4,000 years ago, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. 8,000 is getting pretty nebulous and not easily to talk about. But I often ask folks that the way to look at history is as you're listening to this show, you know what you know because you're alive right now, and whatever depth of knowledge you have on the historical record is your record. And the best way to look at it is from a family perspective. What do you know about your family? Well, can you go back to your parents, the father's side, the paternal side, and the maternal side, the mother's side, and what did the parents know? Well, the parents had to have, so that's a group of 4, a mom and a dad, and now you and your wife. Okay, so there's 2, and then there's 4. Well, when you go back to the next generation, that's a history of 8 people. Most people can't go beyond that 8. Most people can't even get all of that 8 in, or they get one chain that goes back one more to a great-great-grandparent who can tell you some history. So that's basically perhaps 200 years to 250 years of family history that people can actually trace, unless, of course, someone has kept a biblical record or kept a journal or something of that nature. But isn't it strange, because the folks of the olden days who kept meticulous diaries, when they died, family members believed that those journals weren't worth much, and so they would toss them out. I know that certainly occurred in my family on 2 occasions. My mother's went to the dump, and long before I got a chance to get my hands on it, and my grandmother's journal went to the dump. Well, those were diaries, and they had history of things that happened. Though those would be awfully fun to be looking at today and going back and looking at it. And of course, today people pay a lot of money to get their ancestry done, to see at least genetically where they came from. And I'm not always positive how absolutely that is in accuracy when you get back to 2,000 and 3,000 years. So that's interesting to see that that's going on. And of course, there's a privacy right associated with getting that DNA done, because that DNA, genetic DNA, is now being used by the police departments and other people that have a law enforcement desire, and they're using that to, perhaps a good thing is that they're using that DNA to discover people that have committed crimes years and years and years ago, because they can find the family structure, and once they find the family structure of that DNA, they can start tracing back to find who has committed a crime that they have DNA evidence for. And once you have the family structure, you can start doing a great deal of tracing. So DNA is even better than a fingerprint, because it has the exact number of chromosomes running down along the side, and they're in a certain specific order, and they're in that same specific order based on that birth rate that I was just telling you about. Mom and dad, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, and all the way down the line. So can't go back too far in history. And so when we're asking folks, as you've heard me say before, to look at 8,000 years of history, or to look at blocks of stone that are crossing the ocean, some people are going to have to do an awful lot of speculating on how those got made, just like they speculate, and in my mind, not totally accurate, because that's what speculation is. They speculate about the pyramids. They speculate about Teotihuacan down in Mexico. They do a lot of speculating on what happened, okay? And history, of course, gets turned by the writer of the story, the writer of the historical record, and it's not always accurate, because no matter who is sitting there writing, there's going to be a bias, okay? And not a bad bias. The word bias does not mean necessarily that it's something to do with something bad. It just means that as we sit here, as I sit here right now, I have my 75 years sitting in front of folks, listening to them. I bring to the table things that I have learned, not things that perhaps you've learned, not experiences that you have had. So I bring to the table my personal biases about things, including my conservative view. That's why this show is called The Conservative. I have a conservative view of the way the country should run. I have a conservative view on the way a family should run. I have a conservative view on the way you should run a household. I have a conservative view on the way you should run a school system. I have a conservative view on the way you should run a city, and a conservative view on the way you should run a church, a conservative view on the way you should run a county, conservative view on the way you should run a state and a region, and of course the nation, and of course the world. I look at it from a conservative view, and I defy anybody that will look at me and say that you can't be a free man. You should be a free man. And that's what we fought for 245 years ago, was the ability to be a free man, and that's the conservative view. Well, what would stop that conservative view, and we're going to talk about that in just a few seconds, about Vermont and what it's just done with the minimum wage, but a conservative view for most folks means freedom. It means that you don't have someone telling you every single minute of the day when you'll get up, when you'll do this, when you'll do that. And that becomes a problem when the state government begins to tell you these things. You begin to lose your freedoms. And the most basic freedoms in the state of Vermont and in the Constitution of the United States are the freedom to worship the way you want to. You don't want the state telling you the way you're going to worship, okay, or what you're going to hear from on the altar. Thank you, Mr. Trump, for removing that muzzle from the preachers at the pulpit. Up until the last 20 years, there's been a muzzle put on by Mr. Clinton that refused to allow preachers, if they wish to remain tax exempt, from standing in the pulpit and talking about the Christian, Judeo-Christian moral right. And what the heck you go to church for if you're not going to stand there and listen to what is believed to be the moral right from the great book, the most sold book in the world, the Bible. And so that book has the moral value that we're supposed to live by. And if you're not allowed to speak from that position off the pulpit, then maybe that's why people are no longer going to church. When I was a young lad going to church, believe you me, you heard homilies that were directly tied to the Bible, and there wasn't this, everybody's going to be going to heaven. It wasn't that way. It was you had to obey the tenets of the Lord Almighty God, and you had to obey those tenets from the viewpoint of Jesus. That was the way it was taught, and that's the way the Judeo-Christian principles were taught to the founding fathers. They had a uniquely relished fear of the Lord. And most people don't have any fear of the Lord today at all. They just go and do whatever they want to do, and they don't even believe that there's a afterlife in such a manner that you might not get there. And most people, I just read in an article the other day that basically said that everybody that's good goes to heaven. I don't believe that. That's a conservative view. I don't believe that everybody goes to heaven. I don't care how good you are. Okay, you have to be a repentant soul, and you have to take also a responsibility on doing some belief in the faith. Okay, there's some things there you have to have going on to make it. Anyway, this is not a religious program, but I don't want to go off on a tangent. I want to get back to the piece that I just spoke about, which is what's going on here in Vermont. So we have in the state of Vermont a socialistic state. There's no question about it. Folks in the state of Montpelier will tell you that we are not a socialistic state. Well, we are. And you can go and look at that. The government has its hand in the pie for everything that's going on in this state. And the most recent thing is that they have again raised the minimum wage. And they raised it and overrode the governor's veto by one vote. And we had better get busy at turning this government around up there, because the minimum wage in the state of Vermont has been raised every single year for the last 15 years. It's based on a rate of inflation increase. And so there's been a raise every 15 years. And now they've raised it again. We're the highest minimum wage in the nation. Now stop and think about that. How good is that? Well, number one, it's going to help Burlington. It doesn't help the rural parts of Vermont, and it does not help anybody that's going to start a small business and needs help. It's not going to help those people, because startup businesses usually cannot afford a $15 an hour or whatever else that they wish to have on the hourly rate for an employee. Number one, nobody gives a rip the fact that person coming into your business has got to learn the business. They've got to be trained at the expense of the employer to begin. And so you walk into a business and he's going to have to pay you $15 an hour, and your services don't generate $15 an hour. In other words, you don't break even based on your work. And most people that walk into a business situation do not know in the first year exactly what it is that they're supposed to do in order to produce the profit necessary to continue to pay their hourly rate. People don't talk about that kind of stuff. Somehow, I don't know, everybody seems to think that the owner must have money that grows on trees, that they can take whatever the rate determined by the state of Vermont will be and pay that. Well, you wait and see. You're going to see another reduction in small businesses in the state. You're going to see even some large businesses close their doors and go. And I hear people that are watching this show moan and groan about the fact that nothing seems to get done in Vermont that is helpful to the citizens of this state. And why? Well, Those of you that are out there moaning and groaning, is that all you're doing is moaning and groaning? If you're moaning and groaning and not doing a darn thing about it, which means either support a campaign, get up and run for a campaign office yourself, and or support a candidate or make a donation to a candidate so that they can beat back the progressive left. And the progressive left is definitely on the move in the state of Vermont. This is the most progressive state in the Union. California looks like it is, in New York looks like it is, only because it has such a large number of people, population. Vermont has a smaller number, but a huge percentage above all the other states in that population that believes in socialism slash progressive socialism slash democratic socialism slash communism. Communism is akin to socialism in the fact that the socialists and the communists believe that the state, the government, should run your life. They should nationalize, for instance, healthcare. They should nationalize, for instance, energy. They should nationalize, for instance, the tourist industry. They should nationalize the way in which you will drive. More trains, for instance, versus your own personal car. What time you'll get up in the morning to go to work, what time you won't. What time the hours will be, the amount of time that you are allowed to work or not to work. All these little subtle rules, regulations, policies, and procedures that get placed on the backs of the owner, and then obviously on the backs of the employee, because the employee also has to comply with the rules, regulations, policies, and procedures of the state. So it's not just the owner that pays the price, the employee does too, but ultimately the owner pays because they're the ones who have to hire people to help build the product that they're trying to, or produce the service that they're trying to render. And if they don't get help from anybody, well, obviously they go out of business or they have to shut the door. I know of a very nice engineering business in this state who started their business, ran their business as a family business, did very, very well, and they needed a couple of people for help. Well, one of those people never came to work. So they eventually let the person go, and the person went to unemployment, fought it, won unemployment, gave them unemployment, and raised the owner's unemployment rate. Well, the unemployment rate got raised all right, and the owner looked at the state of Vermont and said, I will never hire another employee in this state. I will do it all myself. And they did. And they worked their business, I'm going to say, close to 40 years. The business is still alive. The owners have retired, I believe, but they have never, ever hired another person. Could they have hired people? Sure, they could have. They had a very nice and still do have a very nice business. So that business, because of the way in which the state placed rules and regulations, policies and procedures on them, and denied the fact that the employee was missing time on purpose, no excuses. I know the history of this case. And okay, state of Vermont, that's one. How many others felt that way and did the exact same thing? Except for the fact that this particular employer called the state and said he was going to do that. That's exactly what he was going to do. And they could count on him never, ever hiring another employee in the state of Vermont. And I find that very interesting because he's hired employees in other states for his business. It's not just here. It's just in Vermont that he's never hired anybody else ever. So he's hired other people all over the world, actually, because their business is all over the world. But I found that very interesting. So I suspect that that's not the only story, because usually when you hear a story that's equated to a government rule, regulation, policy, or procedure, there's more than one story like that. I have another interesting case, and people can scratch their head. Had a young woman once that needed $50 more a month in order to make ends meet. Single mom, had one child. I believe the child was in the 4th or 5th grade. Divorced, and working. She was working very hard. She had gotten several raises over the course of a year. It was making a decent wage, but needed $50 more a month. You know what the state of Vermont told her? The state of Vermont, instead of figuring out a way to give her $50 a month more so that she could make her rent or whatever else she needed that money for, legitimate reason, the state of Vermont told her that she needed to quit her job and that they would give her ABC dollars per month. So she could quit her job. So, and went on the state roll. And as far as I know, she has been on that state roll now for a long, long time. So it just doesn't make sense what they're doing up there in that legislative chaos, that progressiveness about let's take care of everybody without any kind of accountability placed on anybody's shoulders to watch that pocketbook. It's easy to go up there and make these comments and pass these laws. Why not? Most of the people that are up there aren't working. Okay, they're what we call legacy babies or baby fund babies. They've got money that's inherited. They've got money up there. Okay, I found it very, very interesting, for instance, that Bernie Sanders, who's running for president of the United States from Vermont, who up until the age of 40, and he got that job up there as mayor in Burlington, never really absolutely had a job. As a matter of fact, he lived off the state where he was living. I think part of it was here in Vermont. You'd have to go back and do that digging. I doubt if during the campaign here we're going to ever have a vetting that would show anybody that Bernie is basically a socialist communist. Okay? Now I can say that because I believe that anybody that go on honeymoon in the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union was the biggest communist state in existence at the time, and raves about Cuba and raves about Venezuela and raves about the good things that are happening in the Soviet Union, is basically a communist. Come on, you rave about these people because that's how you believe philosophically. So Bernie, here we are in the state of Vermont, having sent him down to Washington, D.C. Basically, a poor man is now a multimillionaire. And I found it very interesting that Mr. Bloomberg challenged him on it. And when Bernie is talking about the fact that we need to tax the billionaires, he used to talk about the fact that we needed to tax all the millionaires. He's a millionaire now, so he doesn't talk about the millionaires being taxed anymore. They got to talk about the billionaires. And the 3 homes that he has a beautiful home in Washington, D.C., he has his home in Burlington, and then he has, this is Bernie's words, like most Vermonters, like most other Vermonters, I have a summer camp on the lake. Did you hear what I just said? I have a summer camp on the lake. That's what Bernie Sanders said in the last debate in South Carolina. And it might have been the New Hampshire debate. I'm not quite sure where it was. It's either the New Hampshire debate or the South Carolina debate, but that's what he claimed. And he claimed that most Vermonters had these little summer camps on the lake. Well, I don't know very many Vermonters that have a summer camp on any lake. I don't know most Vermonters that have even one house, much less 3 houses. The thing that they don't tell you is that that's not a camp on the lake. It's a $650,000 home paid for by Bernie at the end of the 2016 campaign in cash. So go tell me about that. And of course, those of you that are watching the show that don't want to go look it up or say, oh, Mike is wrong, there's no way that Bernie's doing that. Go look it up, folks. You're here in Vermont. It doesn't take too long to drive up and see where Bernie lives. And it doesn't take too long to go to his camp and see where it is. And then you tell me, wonder how much that costs. Well, go to the community, or go to the town hall, find out what the cost was and the tax rate, and you can figure out pretty much how much that home cost. It's public record anyway. So don't let anybody kid you that this is a simple little lean-to, a simple little camp. I mean, when I think of a camp, I think of a door that goes into a wooden house that has maybe a bathroom and has a fireplace and maybe a living room with a bedroom and a kitchen. That's about it. That's a camp. Okay, those of you that do a lot of hunting, you know what a deer camp looks like. Okay, not a lean-to. Now I'm not talking about a lean-to. We've got a lot of people that will go and sit in blinds or sit in lean-tos and sit in those kinds of things on the trails. No, we're talking about an actual functioning taxed camp, something that's on the tax roll. So Bernie basically lied like crazy, and we believe this stuff, and we go ahead and we keep hiring him, and we keep sending him down to Washington. And if you look at his legislative record, other than a few post offices here and there, Bernie's not well liked in Washington. Okay, they're doing all they can to try to stop him. Now, we're taping this show on Super Monday, so this is a Monday afternoon. So you're going to see, by the time I get back and show this show again, we're going to be down to Super Tuesday, and we're going to see how he did. There's only 3 people, as I speak to you right now, that are left in the race. They have somehow bought Buttigieg out because he had enough to keep going for at least through Super Tuesday, but he dropped out on Super Monday. Klobuchar's out, and now there's only 3 left. I haven't heard what happened to Warren, so I have to assume she's in, but there's only basically 3 people in, okay? We'll see after Super Tuesday if Bloomberg survives. He's certainly spent enough money. He's up to $500 million right now, okay? That's a lot of money, $500 million he's spent so far on this campaign. And he said he would spend $2 billion, so we'll see. I don't know that money buys a campaign. We're going to find out, aren't we? Okay. So the Bloomberg is in, Sanders is in, Biden is in, and Warren is still out there on the side. I don't know what she's doing. I don't believe that anybody going to let. She's worse than Hillary as a campaigner. She's not going to make it. Okay. I don't know very many people that would be voting for her. Yes, the far left will vote. So Biden makes enough gaffes. He's really a very old man. Bernie is a very old man. You got 2 old men going to go up against Donald Trump, who is also an old man. But Donald Trump has a ton of energy, and he generates a ton of energy. You can say what you want about the guy, but he knows how to go to a rally and fire up the base. And he knows how to fire up people and make them want to do what he'd like for them to do. Those are gifted people that can do that kind of stuff, and he has that gift. He has the ability to persuade people, and he tells it like it is. And if you listen to him carefully, he's actually very funny. He's got a lot of innuendo type jokes, and I know people are going to say, oh yeah, he's had innuendo sexual jokes. Well, go look at Mr. Biden. Mr. Biden, who his jokes about little kids, that's a good one. And then go look at the record of Mr. Sanders, who's got some problems in that area. And Bloomberg, we already know, based on what Mrs. Elizabeth Warren has said, has got huge problems. So you got the 3 old men who have got problems, and then you got Warren, who's left in the campaign, who have basically lied all her life to get to where she is. I mean, you can check back check her record and see that she has told some whoppers. And that Pocahontas whopper will come back to haunt her again and again and again, simply because she was able to go to college because she claimed she was part Indian. And there are tax breaks and college breaks and other kinds of breaks in America for our Native Americans. And she claimed it and used it, and then came to find out that she really doesn't have any American Native Indian blood in her. It's 1/128. I mean, it's so minuscule that you really can't claim it. So Trump was right to call her Pocahontas. And so, big lie, okay? Blames it on her dead mother. Well, that's what my mother always told me. Well, hey, I've got Irish blood in me. I'm not sure that I'm 100% Irish, and I'm not going to go around and say I'm 100% Irish because I'm not absolutely 100% truly sure. And does it really matter? I mean, that's the thing. Who cares? In America, you're not supposed to even care about that stuff. We're supposed to be the melting pot. We're supposed to be able to sit here and enjoy ourselves because we are free men and women. It doesn't matter if you're black. It doesn't matter if you're white. It doesn't matter if you've got yellow skin, pink skin, blue skin, brown skin. It doesn't matter. That's what we're supposed to be going to do. And there's my bias. Okay, I am biased, and I believe that everybody should be treated with respect and dignity, and that everybody should have the opportunity to succeed in America. That does not mean that everybody is absolutely equal. They're not. We are not all equal, because some people have the gifts of interpersonal skill gifts. People that can say thank you and please are going to do a lot better in this world than those who don't know how to do that, for instance. So that's a skill. those that can read, those that can write, those that can do mathematics at a very high level are going to do better than those who can't. Everybody has an opportunity to get an education. Now, what you do with that education, big difference. Well, believe it or not, I've come to the end of the show. That was the fastest half hour. I told you it was going to be fast. Make sure tomorrow you vote. That will be Super Tuesday, Vermont's voting. Bye now.